Welcome, 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 everybody. Another beautiful day. I know I say it every single time, but it always is because I always have beautiful people to speak with. And today we have Lindsey Hardegree. Is that correct?
Hardegree, you got it.
Hardegree. Now, the reason why I'm so happy, Lindsey, is because I have difficulty saying surnames. So that's another champion for me. So without that, now we have this wonderful lady with us today. I don't know what she really does, as always, but we will find out just by having a simple conversation between two people. Lindsey, welcome, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you. So glad to be here. I'm having a good day so far.
Good. We like to hear that. We like to hear happy people on here. So in the meantime, what we're going to hear from you is just to start the whole conversation off and just let us know exactly what you do to help people, and then we will go with the flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of do a few different things. I have a full-time job, and then I also run my own business on the side. So lots of different things going on. Full-time, I am the executive director of a small church nonprofit. So doing a lot of things to help people that way. And then the work that I do kind of in my free time in the evenings and on the weekends is that I run a organizing business where I work with people either in their homes or virtually to get organized using Marie Kondo's organization method. And then I also work with people on productivity consulting and budget coaching. So all of the different ways of kind of getting organized for yourself and kind of keeping things together. So
well, it seems like you're the lady for me. I'm the totally disorganized person in the world. So I think I've met the right person to help me out. So what got you to the stage of wanting to do this? What was the flip within your life that thought, well, okay, let's do this as a business?
Yeah, so I have worked in nonprofit probably about getting close to 20 years at this point. And it's really fantastic, wonderful work. I've worked for a few different really great nonprofits, really love the job I have right now. I've been here almost 8 years. But with this particular kind of work, I'm working with other organizations. We're helping to provide grant funding. I'm helping to help connect individuals who want to support financially the work that we're doing. So it's a lot of kind of not necessarily one-on-one working and helping people. It's helping the larger system. But having that opportunity to really work side by side with somebody to work one-on-one is something that I don't particularly get the opportunity to do in my day job. So that paired with the fact that I had kind of started helping a lot of my friends with getting their homes organized, just very, very casually. It's, oh, your closet is very neat and tidy. Would you come and help me do my closet? I will give you, pizza and wine. And the answer was, yeah, that sounds like a good arrangement. Let's do that.
What, the pizza or the wine?
Oh, the both, actually. So yeah, just kind of helping out with my friends, helping them to kind of get things in their lives kind of in order. And then I started to run out of friends to help because I'd helped them all. So I was like, I'm really enjoying this. I enjoy getting to work one-on-one with somebody. It's a skill that I personally have. It's something that I've kind of cultivated and grown over the course of my life. And so for me, it really is very rewarding to kind of give back in that way, to be able to work with people and say, here's something I'm good at, and it's something that you need help with, and let's work together so that now you can do the things that you're good at because you're not trying to work on this thing anymore. And so that's what got me to the point where I said, let me look into actually, how do I help strangers with this now? How do I figure out a way to actually turn this into a bit of a side business so that I can be continuing to do the work that I do in the daytime, the stuff that is very rewarding to me in a different way, but to also have the opportunity to work with people one-on-one on something a bit more personal. So yeah, that was probably, I'd say 2019-ish is when that kind of shift happened and when I got certified by Marie Kondo. That was in the spring of 2019.
Okay, so when we're talking about doing this professionally, organization, what exactly do you organize now from a professional point of view? Are we talking about you're helping people with books, organizing, getting funding, organizing as in physically when they're moving houses, or some of the above?
Yeah, so typically we're looking at actually in your home, but I do work with some people sometimes in their offices, but actually physically getting organized is the first thing that I started helping people with. So Marie Kondo's method, kind of her KonMari method for decluttering, is a very kind of systematic approach to going through basically every single thing that you own. And it was something that when I learned more about the way that she kind of helped people through that process, it was very much similar to what I was naturally already doing when I was helping out with my friends. And so it was a really good fit for me to say, you know what, let me go get certified by her and do this particular method. And then I can work with people on that. So when we're working together, we're literally decluttering every single thing in your entire home. And there's an order that you work through. We go through your clothing, then your books, then all of your papers, the things in the bathroom, the things in the kitchen, all of these different topics, all of the hobbies and whatnot, and really have that opportunity to look through everything, to actually put your hands on everything and to say, what is it that is your vision for your life? What's important to you? What are you working towards? And does this particular physical thing help you to get there? Or is it something that is no longer serving you in that way? And if it's something that is helping you to get to where you want to be, if it's a good part of that process for you, then we say that that item sparks joy, and you should absolutely keep things that spark joy for you. But if you've got something where it's no longer serving you and the vision that you have for your life, then it doesn't spark joy anymore. And so you let it go with gratitude. And we work through your entire home that way. So that is the way that I've kind of been working with people for organizing. It naturally led into working with people on productivity consulting and budget coaching, because inevitably you don't only have boxes of things that need to be gone through, but also folders on the computer that need to be gone through. And how on earth do you deal with your email management? And thinking through organizing a budget and actually creating the habits to stick with it. All of these things tie in together. It's all about identifying your priorities and values, and then intentionally orienting the things that are in your life, the people in your life, the processes in your life, to help you get more towards and oriented towards that vision. So it started off with the physical things in your house, and then it wound up becoming a lot more than that.
Okay, let's go with that. So you're helping people organize in more ways than one. I'm sure you've come with some people that you're trying to work with, and huge resistance. They do not want to move anything. They do not want to make any changes. Give me a story when you've had a customer that's given you a huge amount of resistance not to change, and you've somehow got them to think differently so you can go forward to help them declutter their life in more than one way.
Yeah, it's interesting because the people that I work with, very often, they actually do want change. They just have no clue how to get there. Okay. And sometimes they don't know what goes into it. And when we start to work together, we come up against those pieces of resistance that are keeping them from the change.
That's right, yeah.
But that's really the key to how to get past the change, is to help remind them that they are the one that want the change.
Yeah.
It's, it doesn't matter to me what you keep. You could have a home that is totally, completely cluttered. I don't have to live in it. That's not, that's not on me. It's what you say that you want. And that is really the way that we work together, so that I can help people to get past the things that are kind of blocking them themselves. It's this opportunity to really very intentionally stop and focus and say, what do you want? What do you not want? What does this vision look like? Let's not just say, oh yeah, I kind of know what I want for my life. Let's get started. Let's actually stop and sit down and have a conversation and outline it and detail it. And that's really the way I start all of my client relationships. Particularly when we're organizing, the first thing that we do at the very first session, whether it's in person or virtual, is we have a conversation. And that conversation often lasts, 30 to 45 minutes, where we're sitting there saying, what is it that you want? Why did you call me? What are the reasons that you're looking to make a change? What is driving you bonkers? What is something that's super important to you that you want to make sure you're prioritizing? Let's kind of pull out all of those details. And that's the vision that you have for your life. My job is then not to force you to change. My job is to keep lifting your vision up to the surface and say, you say that this is what you want. The thing that you are trying to make a decision about does not, from what you are saying to me, it doesn't seem like it serves your vision. So I need you to either justify to me why it does serve your vision, or I need you to let it go. And let's talk about that and kind of figure out what is it that's holding you back. So the driving force is the fact that they do want change. It's not that I have to force people to accept change when they don't want it. Usually when they're calling me, they do want it. They just don't know how to get it. And so it's that relationship. It's working through it and figuring out, how do we get you where you want to be in a way that feels true to you and kind of honors and lifts up the things that are important for you.
Interesting. And when it comes to change, you're very good at navigating the conversation to help people change, because obviously you're going to get some kind of resistance, regardless whether they've called you in to help them. Otherwise, they could do it themselves.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. So there's obviously this conversation that you have, and there's always this resistance, and you're very good at having that conversation for them to understand why they're trying to do it. So you're very, and I can see you have that good conversation with them. Now, change is very important in your mindset when you're speaking with your client. But from a point of view of you, are you always very good at having that mindset of having no problems with changing clutter? Was you always in a situation where you've always been like that since a child, or was it a process that you had to go through for you to have that change of mindset?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay.
So I am, when I was a kid, there were some things that I was very kind of organized and thoughtful and regimented about. And then there were some things that were an absolute complete mess. And I wanted things the way that I wanted them. Like the thought of change absolutely was not something I embraced. And I'll be real honest with you right now. Personally, I don't necessarily like change very much now. I recognize the necessity for it. And sometimes that's a part of just life and, you know, being a grown up. But I'm somebody that really thrives in consistency and routine. And so change can be a really difficult process, even for me personally. But you make change when you realize you need change, and that what's on the other side of change is going to be something that's stronger, better, going to serve you well. And so you have to keep coming back to that intentional piece of the process. It's, I don't like change, but I am intentionally choosing to engage in it because I know that what's on the other side is something that is good for me. And that's something that I think we all have to kind of learn, especially if you are one of those people that does thrive really well with kind of routine and structure, because the nature of those things is that they're supposed to not change. So yeah, it's kind of using these tools to be able to keep you in a place or get you to a place that you want to be, and acknowledging that sometimes that does involve change, even if it doesn't naturally feel very good. So
yeah, I mean, I'm a bit on a different side, because I'm more of especially with my neurodivergence, and then I like to go with the flow. As we're having this conversation, as you can already tell, no, nothing about you, but I'm going with the flow. And change, I'm okay with it. No, I'm not. If my partner, my partner would be sitting there thinking, no, you don't. Yeah, you're very stubborn. You're very stubborn. No, so I'm going to tell the truth. Yeah, like most people, you know, they're set in their ways. They don't want to change unless it serves them in a particular way. And I suppose this is what you actually touch on, is doing something like that. So when you was a child, obviously you were regimental in what you wanted to do. But I understand that you found out you was ADHD at some stage.
yeah, I was 37 when I was diagnosed.
Wow.
So I'd gone through a lot of life not knowing this piece of information about myself. It makes a lot of sense now, though.
Okay, let's take it from there. Now obviously you saying that it makes a lot of sense. You've got hindsight. So
yes, yeah.
So with that hindsight, now makes a lot of sense. When did it start with hindsight make sense? How far can you go back now that it makes sense? What happened way back? And I don't care if you're in the crib, you go back as far as you want.
Yeah, no, it literally, yeah, it's as far as I can remember, when I look at it with this new understanding, there's not an area of my life that I don't somehow see, oh, that's why I did that, or I see why I was really resistant to that. You know, it's with looking back on things, there's a lot about who I am that very much was driven by me being neurodivergent. I just didn't know it. You know, back when we're in the early 80s, all the people who are ADHD are very hyperactive little boys. Like the rest of us don't exist. You know, it's just, it didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to anybody. It didn't occur to my parents that that was something to be looking for, because nobody was really looking for it at that time. But I mean, there are things my mom and I have had conversations where, you know, even me switching as a baby from baby food to solid foods, we can see that there are aversions that developed then that have stuck with me, you know, 40 years later. And in hindsight, that was absolutely related to me being neurodivergent. I just had no idea. We thought that I've been a picky eater my whole life. You know, it's so many little itty bitty things that there's, with this new knowledge in mind, I just understand myself so much better, and try to really give myself a little bit of grace around some of the things that have been frustrating for me about myself my whole life. It's, you know, it's okay that that is way that you are, because your brain just works differently, and it's nothing that I can control. I can control my reaction to it. And so let me look at it from that perspective.
So as a child, just give us some clues, just some clues that were quite difficult for you as a child, and obviously your parents didn't know, it wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
So just give us, because I can feel the energy oozes from you, this energy from you, this speed, I can feel it. So just give us some examples as a child, you know, what exactly happened, what difficulties you had that was quite strenuous.
Yeah. So there are some really little things, like I kind of already mentioned. One of them is, you know, weird food aversions that didn't make sense at all. And that is something I can see has been a part of my neurodivergent. I also, there's some just like weird little habits and things, like I have little fidgety things that I do that are obviously little bits of being hyperactive that just seemed like bad habits that I never kicked, like biting my nails or like messing with my hair, that kind of stuff. As I got a little bit older, one of the things that has stuck with me even to this day, and this is not a bad thing, it's just, you know, all things in moderation, and hyper focus is not moderation. One of the things that has always been a challenge for me is that I love reading. It is my favorite hobby. It is the thing I would choose to do if I was given, you know, an uninterrupted day to do absolutely nothing. But I will read to the point where I am ignoring everything else.
Okay, listeners, I'm just going to stop you there. Listeners, I'll tell you what, I've been sitting here and secretly I've been thinking, why has this woman got so many books in the background? And I have to admit, when I say so many books, listeners, I'm not talking about a normal shelf that has probably about, you know, 60 books. I am looking at probably about 200 books sitting there minimum in the background, lit up in the background. So I'm glad she brought that up.
Yeah,
so,
this is not a Zoom background. This is my actual library.
oh wow, that's all I can say. Sorry for interrupting you. I just thought I'd just describe exactly what's going on. So yeah, so the book reading, you was really intense with it and constant, and from what I'm the opposite. I wish I could, you know, continuously read. So reading was one of the things that you would continuously do.
Yeah, and I would get in trouble for it. I would
Really?
be reading in class when I wasn't supposed to be, because I was bored with what we were doing in class. I very distinctly remember this moment from when I was a little kid, and we were at church on Sunday, and there was a guest preacher that Sunday, and we were sitting towards the front, and I was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. And as was common, I would have a book with me. And when the sermon started, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm a little kid. So I'm sitting there reading the Babysitter's Club. And after the service was over, my mom said, the preacher kept looking at you with really dirty looks because you were reading during the sermon. And I was like, I don't care, whatever. I have things I need to read, you know? So it actually got to the point where, as I would imagine, I don't have any children myself, but I would imagine that most parents of kids with ADHD struggle with the right way to discipline their children when they are misbehaving, because it's regular old punishments don't tend to work, I have found, for a lot of kids. And so we tried all of the normal things that parents would think to try. And what wound up being the punishment that I would get if I was misbehaving, or
no book.
They would take my books away from me. It was the only thing that worked. Like, no TV, no friend time. You have to stay in your room. I'm like, great, I have to stay in my room. Let me sit here and read a book all day.
But hold on. Just let us know, what was the worst punishment of all? Which was the book that you could not go without?
Oh, I read through them so quickly. It's not a specific book. It would be more about length of time. No books for a week was torture. Absolute torture. Because I just wanted to sit and read, and I couldn't. And what am I supposed to do with myself? You know, that's the thing I wanted to focus on. And in hindsight, I can very clearly see that it's a hyper focus. It's, you know, here is dopamine in page form that I'm just consuming as fast as I can possibly go. And it's something that actually can be a struggle sometimes now that I am an adult. You know, there have been times throughout my life when I've got several advanced degrees, when I should have been working on schoolwork and instead I was reading a novel, or I should have been prepping for a big project and instead I was reading. So then I have to, at the last minute, pull it out and do it all at the last minute in order to get things done. So it is one of those things that I think, even though you would think, oh, this kid really likes to read, that's a good thing. Yes, that is a good thing, but not necessarily the way that I went about it. And it can still, you know, that's a challenging habit for me now. I'm stressed out. I just want to ignore the world and sit there and read a book. And sometimes I have to, like, deal with real life instead. And it can be very challenging to force myself to not do this thing I love doing. You know, it's the same as asking somebody to just stop playing video games or to stop watching sports, or, you know, any of the other things that we get excited and love. That's mine. And it can be a great thing, and it can also be a hindrance sometimes. So, and that's something that I've experienced since I learned how to read. So,
okay, so let's go a bit further into that, because that's quite interesting. That part of your ADHD is you've got to always read, and this is because your brain. How do you feel like? As my mother would say, you know, you're going 9 knots an hour, which is very fast. Do you feel like that the world is going so slow and not fast enough for you, and you're thinking like crazy, and you've got to do something about it? How does your ADHD physically and mentally affect you?
Yeah, so for me, really, I'm much more of the inattentive piece of things, you know, as opposed to, like, there are some hyperactive things that I do, but my ADHD is really more on the inattentive side of things. And so for me, lots of times I struggle to focus. It's, you know, here's this really hard, difficult task or something that I just don't want to do. It can be very difficult to sit there and force myself to do it. Even if I know it's going to take 5 minutes, like, why don't I just sit down and do it and be done with it? I would love the answer to that question. You know, I don't have the answer to that question. My brain does not function that way. There's this big mental block and it just won't. And so for me, it can be very tempting to then go escape into things that I do like to do. And so that's, you know, kind of an ongoing struggle and challenge, is how to really rein myself in, focus where it's important to get done the things that need to get done, prioritize the things that are actually the most important. I'm also really bad at that. If there's something that's important, but I don't feel like doing it, I am tempted to come do all of these other little tasks that are things that need to get done, sure, but this should get done first. And I still have a hard time prioritizing. So there's a lot of that just executive function that I really struggle with. And it's something that, as I have gotten older, it's gotten more and more difficult. And so that's probably, you know, the first thing that made me say, I need to look into this, that, you know, eventually led to my diagnosis, is that I've been able to accomplish a lot of stuff. And how come the simple stuff is so hard now? It was like the first really big red flag to me, is that it's always been hard. And in hindsight, I can see where it was hard, but I was able to get past it for various different reasons. And as you get, you know, that cumulative effect, eventually at some point you hit the roadblock. You know, you've been able to cope and manage and maintain your systems in a way that are exciting and helpful and are able to get you what you need until they stop working. And when they stop working, they're like, really stop working. You just are basically non-functional in a lot of ways, which is incredibly frustrating as somebody who has been able to accomplish a lot. It's why can I not anymore? I don't. So yeah.
I can imagine. Well, I don't have to imagine. I've been there, done that. So, you know, and brought the t-shirt. Now, with your ADHD, how did that affect you when you were having relationships? Like I said, you got hindsight. You didn't know at the time, but when you was growing up and having relationships, let's say in your mid-teens, how did it affect you from that point of view?
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with ADHD, and I see it a little bit in myself. It's not a huge piece of what I experience, but there is a little bit of it. Is this concept of the rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It's the, oh, they didn't want to talk to me at lunch, and that must mean I'm a horrible, terrible person, and they don't like me, and they don't want to be friends, when really it's just that, you know, like they had homework they needed to go do instead. It had nothing to do with me. You know, that really, that sense of overly assuming that, oh, there's something wrong with me, and there's a reason people don't like me. And so that, I think, was probably one of the biggest things when I was a teen. It's not something I struggle with as much now, but as a teen, that is something that really was difficult. I always had a hard time making friends, even when I was younger, you know, in grade school and middle school. I always had a hard time making friends. I'm also a very introverted person. And I didn't at the time, you know, I didn't quite get what all of that meant. I didn't have the words to describe who I am. Now I have those. I know that if I spend a lot of time with people, I'm going to also need to plan some time to not be with people to recover from that. But at the time I thought, oh, that means that I'm, you know, being stuck up, or I'm, you know, being very, you know, snobby and not wanting to talk to people, when it was really just I was recovering and I didn't have the words to describe that. And so kind of like this rejection piece that I know is related to ADHD and this very strong introverted piece together made it really hard to find friends and to keep friendships. So that was something that I did struggle with. It got a little bit better as I got a little older. I think that I kind of started to have a little bit more confidence in it's okay to like the things that I like. And, you know, if I'm not a popular kid, it's okay. That's not a bad thing. That's just a thing. So with a little bit of maturity, that was less hurtful for me. But it did mean that, you know, I was probably an adult before I had really good, strong, lasting friendships, that could stand, you know, relationship ups and downs in that way. And I think a lot of that probably was related to being neurodivergent. I just had no idea. So.
Right. So when the relationships changed and you started holding those relationships, was it a situation that was you became to accept who you are? Now, who you are at the time wasn't ADHD because you didn't know what it was.
Right.
But at the time, it was, I am who I am. I've fed up of what's happened in my teens. You know, I'm just going to be who I am. What was the situation? How did the change take? Because some change had to take for your relationships to change. So where did that change? What happened?
So maybe a little bit of background might be helpful to kind of help understand some of this.
Let's do that.
I'm not the popular kid. I'm not the sporty kid. I like things that people thought were weird or stupid. Like I am a massive Star Wars fan.
What? Excuse me, you're not stupid being a Star Wars fan. Do you know what they say about?
It's fun to be a Star Wars fan.
Do you know what they say about Star Wars?
But in the 90s, it was very, very like that. You didn't talk about
geniuses. We're geniuses being Star Wars. You know, funny enough, I was having a conversation just a few moments ago about Star Wars, and they say if you like Star Wars, you're a genius. I have no problems about liking Star Wars fans. So please carry on. I now like you. Now I know you're a Star Wars. I like you now. So carry on about Star Wars.
That's the thing is, you know, most kids in middle school are sitting there talking about boys and wanting to go to the mall. And I was sitting there reading Star Wars novels, which, you know, was just like not a thing that happened. So like I like things that people thought were kind of weird or odd. I was one of the smartest kids. That sounds so completely like awful for me to say that out loud, but I was always one of the smartest kids. I was bored to tears in school most of the time. I now know why, like that also makes sense. But it also meant that, you know, people didn't like me because I was the smarty pants and the teachers liked me. And then as I got a little bit older, I've always been somebody, you know, who really enjoyed music and stories and reading and movies and all of this stuff. And theater was a really, really big part of my kind of childhood on into becoming an adult. So I was the one who was always running around in all black, doing all of the stage management for all of the theater kids, you know, which theater kids are always the weird kids. And so when I was younger, you know, in kind of like my early teens on up until I got into college, it was, I'm kind of weird and I really like these things and I know I'm not supposed to, but it is what I like. And eventually with maturity, I got to the point where I said, no, I don't care if people think this is weird. I like it. It's fine. There are other people who also like it. There's a reason why these industries exist. You know, it's not because there's only 4 of us. So it became a point where I could kind of accept who I was and the fact that maybe I didn't do things the way I was supposed to, but I did the way things I was supposed to. And that was fine. There was nothing wrong with that. It wasn't this weirdness that I had to apologize for. It was something that I could loudly proclaim. And so that really did for me, being able to kind of go there, created the opportunity for me to be a lot more confident in who I was. And therefore I could be more confident in the relationships that I was building. It was not so much I'm approaching everything with this kind of apologetic, shy perspective. I could really embrace what I am, embrace who I am, embrace the things that I love, and share them with people who also love them, and to create community in different kinds of ways. So.
No, I totally see that. And once you go through that acceptance stage, then obviously you start to bring forth the people that would accept you. Yeah. You're not trying to be something different. I've said this before in other podcasts that I've done. And I'm just really glad you just got to that stage and you thought, I am who I am. And you've had some beautiful relationships from that way on. Oh, of course, it wasn't perfect, but it was better than what it was before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going forward from there, then your relationships were improving. So that was an improvement. But obviously you still had issues because later on down the line, you thought you had to get diagnosed for something. So going on from there, I mean, what issues as an adult did you have with hindsight, having ADHD and having got to the stage of accepting yourself, relationships improving, but you still had certain issues? What was still happening? Because obviously something was, because down the line you had to have a diagnosis. So what else was happening along the way?
Yeah, so a lot of the way that I kind of move through the world, which I think you start to understand that more and more when you are no longer living at home, and then you're no longer within a structured, you know, undergraduate school environment, and now you've got a job and you've got to pay the bills and you've got to take care of the house. And, you know, as responsibility grows and shifts and everyone else's structure goes away and you have to come up with your own structure, I think that's really when I started to struggle. And it was actually, in hindsight, kind of a long process of things slowly getting worse and worse and worse. I have 2 master's degrees and I just completed my doctorate. And so I've done a lot of school. Most of that was done while working a full-time job at the same time. So it's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of having to be very rigid and structured in my time to make sure I'm getting work done and also getting school done. I also, I own a home, and so I'm responsible for taking care of the home, and for making sure that all of the bills get paid on time and that everything is clean and taken care of. I've got 2 dogs, so their lives are dependent on me. So as all of these things are kind of slowly building and adding on, what I now know were coping mechanisms and kind of the tools that I had discovered along the way without realizing that's what they weren't getting the job done anymore. You know, I was always the person from a very young age, whenever there was a school project, I was doing it at midnight the night before it was due. Always. Had no idea that was because I couldn't prioritize and I needed to thrive on the adrenaline to get through it, because that's all ADHD. Had no idea. But that was the way I'd always approached things. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting here and I'm working on a doctorate and I have a full-time job. And by then I was also doing my part-time work. And I couldn't just get it done at midnight the night before it was due, because I was so completely exhausted the night before it was due that I needed to go sleep. I couldn't prioritize actually getting work done earlier. I was having a really hard time focusing on things that I did care about, that were important to me, because I had the way that I was working through everything else had kind of burned me out as far as my executive function. And previously, all of the different systems and kind of tips and tricks that I had in place had been able to get me over the edge, and it just wasn't enough anymore. So that's ultimately why I went and, saw a doctor and had a conversation around this. Once we got to talking, it became so blatantly obvious that it had been, a part of my life, my whole life. But in that, it really was kind of I had a really intricate, structured system of coping mechanisms that had worked really well for a long time. And then all of a sudden it fell apart, and it just didn't work anymore. And it was nothing I did. It's just that the system had too much tension and it broke. And so that's, and that I'm surprised it didn't break earlier, to be perfectly honest, because it was a little bit ridiculous. So yeah, that's kind of the way that I got to seeking a diagnosis, was saying something is wrong. I'm not able to do the things that I was doing before, but I wasn't doing the things I was doing before because I was very, adept at it, or I had a really good, thoughtful process. I was bootstrapping it together as best I could, and then the bootstraps fell off. So yeah.
Okay, well, saying that, you've got the diagnosis now. Now, the aha moment came, and you thought, okay. And then we get the dominoes started falling, and the whole story came together. Now, beyond the diagnosis, what did you do to make some changes? You knew, okay, this is what's going on. This is where I need to focus. Prioritization is a problem. Did you find any system, any advice, any help to be able to make those changes? What happened beyond there?
Yeah, I think that there is some power in understanding, just to be perfectly honest, that once I understood what was going on and what the challenge was, that in and of itself was helpful. Because lots of times there would be a lot of negative self-talk. What you have been able to do X, Y, and Z. Why can you not do this thing right here? And I'd get mad at myself. And having an understanding of what was underlying all of that made it so that, okay, you've been able to do X, Y, and Z, but you're struggling to do this. And you know why you're struggling? Because this is who you are. So let's pause, give yourself a minute, allow yourself to be okay with the fact that this is what it is, and then we'll move forward. So it may not be that there's any change that happens there. It's just an understanding that in and of itself helps to kind of break down some of those barriers. So that was definitely a piece of it. A lot of people I know, whenever they kind of get this diagnosis, one of the things that they turn to is there some sort of system of calendars and planning or coaching or ways that you can work with somebody to identify tips and tools for executive function? I'll be real honest. I had already done all of that for myself. My psychiatrist and I talked about that. Did I need to find an ADHD coach to help me work through what are some ways that I could work? Yeah. And as we were talking about it, she's like, I already figured out all of those tips and tools. The reason they weren't working anymore was because my brain did not have enough dopamine. And so medication is honestly the thing that has helped me the most.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like night and day. Starting to take stimulant medication, and that has been my number one thing. It is on a day where I can't have it, which I do take it most days, but there's some occasional shortages that have happened in recent years. And so if it's like, I don't know, it's like trying to run a marathon through mud without it. And so that's been like my number one change, is that a lot of the external things that I could do to support that a lot of people would turn to with a diagnosis, they were already the things that I was doing. The medication made the biggest difference for me. And it made it so that all of the systems I had in place would start working again. I had kind of built these tools and these crutches and coping mechanisms, and they weren't working, but the medication like started the machine back up again, and it made it so that the things I'd already discovered were working for me again. So yeah, that's my biggest thing.
So when you took the medication just for your ADHD,
Yeah.
what improvements did you find? Like you said, it was the focus that you was lacking, and plus other things. So I know you said it was night and day, but just try to describe it for someone that's not in your position.
Yeah.
The physicalities and the improvements that you went through when you took the actual medication.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've tried to describe this before to other people, and folks who have ADHD or other different kinds of neurodivergence. When I explain it, they're like, "Oh, I see that." And when I try to explain it to neurotypical people, they're like, "Why couldn't you just do that?" You know, they have a really hard time,
of course,
seeing what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that's part of that is, and I don't think that he'd mind me saying this. My dad is neurotypical, and I have tried so hard to explain to him, and he just doesn't get it. And he loves me, and he understands that this is something that I have discovered about myself, and that I've got doctors who are able to help me care for that. And so he is like so supportive, but he doesn't get it. I don't know that he'll ever get it. So yeah, trying to explain the difference is really hard if you are neurotypical, because you might not get what I'm saying. But for the folks who might get it, it's for me, some of the biggest things that I experience are task initiation is really, really challenging. I know what I need to work on. I know what I need to do. I know where the thing is in order to do what I need to do. All of the pieces are laying right there. I just need to do it. I just need to start. And starting feels like slamming my head into a brick wall if I'm unmedicated. And so task initiation has gotten a lot better with the medication. When I'm on the medication, sometimes I say, I need to send this really difficult email. It will take me 3 minutes. And then I just sit down and do it. Which is not something that comes naturally to me. That is a medication thing right there. The fact that I can actually do it when I need to do it. That's medication. So that's a big piece of it. Focus is a huge piece of it. I am really good at focusing on the things that I find enjoyable, like reading a book, and not focusing on everything else. And so when I'm on my medication, that just kind of gets all like flattened out a bit. I don't feel like I have to go read when something is stressing me out. I can just go do the work and know that the reading can come later. And I actually am able to focus on the things I need to focus on, as opposed to just sitting there and staring at the computer screen and not being able to do the work. So it just really does create this kind of like leveling, balancing thing. It wasn't that I didn't know what to do. It's just I literally physically could not make myself do it. And with medication, that is so much easier. I remember the day I took my very first dose. I actually know the minute that it kicked in, which is kind of weird to me now, because now that I take it on a regular basis, I can't say, oh, yeah, nope, the medication's working. It doesn't work quite like that. But on the first day, I did notice it. And I had to run an errand first thing in the morning, which is not typical for me. And so I was driving in my car, not far from my house, and I pulled up to a red light. And all of a sudden, I realized that I was sitting in my car, watching the red light, waiting for it to turn green. And it was weird, because normally I would be looking in 17 different directions and fiddling with the radio and tapping my foot because I was really annoyed with having to sit and wait on the red light. And there are all these voices going on in my head. And I said, I need to be doing this, and I should be working on this. And don't forget this. When you get home, there's got to be this. I was sitting in my car looking at the red light, waiting for it to turn green. And I was like, is this what normal people feel? Like, is this what everybody else is experiencing all of the time? How have I missed this? How did I not know that what I was experiencing was abnormal? Like, it was this very clear oh, I get it, kind of a moment.
Mm.
And like I said, it's not that kind of clear cut night and day at this point. It's just when the meds are working, I'm working, and when they've stopped working, I'm all in the fine. So, but yeah, it was just this really kind of strange realization that the experience that I'd been having for 37 years wasn't normal.
Mm.
And that's okay. That's not a bad thing, it's just I was wired differently and didn't know it.
No, I totally feel you. I mean, I don't use medication at all. I use music, or amongst other things, and I meditate. The music is a way of, how can I say, it's like a metronome. It keeps me focused and slows me down, because otherwise my brain goes 9 knots an hour. You know how it feels, and it's just everything's all over the place. But there's so many things you can think of very fastly, but the music is what helps the tempo of the way I think, and it slows me down.
I use music a lot in my coping mechanisms. Music's a big thing for me too.
Yeah.
I have very specific playlists where if I'm working on this particular kind of task, I'm going to listen to this kind of music.
Yeah.
That'll help me to stay focused on the thing I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And I won't use that same music when I'm trying to do this kind of task, because it's going to put me in the wrong headspace and I won't be able to focus correctly. So there literally are like Spotify playlists where I'm like, this is what I listen to when I'm reading. Yeah. This is what I'm listening to when I'm reading for school. Yeah. This is what I'm listening to when I'm writing, because these are all different things that require something different. Yep. If I need to sit down and just knock out a whole bunch of emails, I go to this kind of music. So that's something that I personally use as one of my tools, is to switch back and forth depending on what it is I'm trying to get done in a moment.
Yeah. And that's what I've been using for years, to be honest, which is a very powerful tool for us to just regulate ourselves in a massive way. So that's really interesting. So you use the medication that worked for you. Obviously, it's different for everybody. Other people don't have to use it. Other people do use it, and they use different type of medication. So it all depends on the person. So
there's not like a one. This is the thing that works for everybody.
No, exactly.
That's not the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be delved into. So you've got that medication now. You're in a position where you can now focus. You've now in a position, you've got your business running, and you're sorting everybody out and making sure they're focused and focusing what they need to declutter within their lives. You are kind of, I suppose, in a way, you've decluttered the way you think, because usually things are hobbly-gobbly all over the place. And now you can understand, if you do this and do that, there's some kind of structure and order. So effectively, you're doing that in other people's lives, understanding what chaos is like and how to really sort the chaos, right? Because you've had to live the chaos. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's as I learned this about myself and kind of thought backwards, what I did without realizing it is I took all of the coping mechanisms that I had cobbled together over the years and I monetized them. Help other people do the same thing. Yeah, like that's 100% what I did without even realizing it, because I started my business about 3 years before I got my diagnosis. Yeah, so I had been doing it for a very long time and helping friends before that. Even it's something that I'd been doing for a super long time. Yeah, but it wasn't, you are so good at organizing. It was, I have had to be good at organizing because I cannot function if things are out of order, because then I will get so distracted and I'll be all over the place. Yeah. So I've created coping mechanisms that work really well for me.
Exactly.
And now I can share them with other people as a way for them to help structure and organize their spaces and kind of their systems and whatnot. So it's 100% related. I just had no idea at the time. So
do you know what? I see this pattern constantly, and it's when we're ADHD, be you autistic, dyslexia, whatever, because we've had to go through the pain of trying to be focused, organize, whatever the case may be, great leaders are brought about when it comes to when you're neurodivergent. And the reason being is because we've had to struggle to be focused and do the best we can. When it comes to being a leader, we find it quite natural to do so.
Yeah.
Because of the skill sets we've had to build as we go along. And what I've noticed when I've been speaking to a lot of people on these podcasts, it's the same thing over again. Successful business people are using the same tools that they've used to navigate themselves through life, and using those same tools to help people. And that's why it's so easy for them to actually support, to help other people build their business, or just from a one-to-one point of view, because all they're doing is they're not using something that they've had to learn,
right,
try to remember. They're using something that's an actual street smart skill that's they've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And they learn the intricacies of those skill sets that you can't learn from university.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
You can't learn that. And hence why we're so good at being leaders, and we're so good at what we do. And by going on this journey, doing this podcast, and I'm so glad I've done it, I can see the pattern and the skill set that we have. So listeners, you know, when you're there and you're having a bad day, and it is difficult when you have your autism, your dyslexia, or anything, ADHD, it could be anything else. It is difficult. You know, you do think to yourself, why do I have this curse? Not until you get to the stage of acceptance, you have it. What's your strengths? What's your weaknesses? Once you get to that stage and you can see it for what it is, you then will see, actually, you are so glad you have it, because you have a skill that nobody else will ever have. Lindsey, you got anything to say about that? Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with you. And it's one of those things where I think what I see on social media sometimes, because, you know, all of the ADHD memes pop up on my Instagram too. A lot of people like to say, oh, I get it, particularly with ADHD. This is a superpower in disguise. And sure, yes, that is, it can be that, absolutely. But there's a downside. Like it's a disability. It's not just a good thing that we're calling a bad thing. There are bad parts about it too.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of that acceptance that you're talking about is really the key to finding ways to manage your neurodivergence in a way that is going to actually work for you. Yeah. It's not just saying, here are the exciting and good and superpower things about it, but also acknowledging, and there's some not good stuff about it too.
Yeah.
And when the not good pieces are in place, how do you manage that? How do you kind of work through those pieces? What are the coping mechanisms there? Where are the places that you turn when you need help? Are there accommodations at school or at work that you could be taking advantage of that you're not? Really thinking through how you deal with the downside in a way that still feels like you're you. A great example is some people turn to medication, and for some people medication does not work. It makes you feel terrible. Yes. So that's not the right answer for those folks. What is the right answer for you? And it's a lot of trial and error, which is so incredibly frustrating because you just want to fix it, and it's not something that can be fixed. It's something that can be managed, and you have to figure out for yourself, what does that managing the not so good parts look like?
Yeah.
And the first thing that you have to do in order to do any of that work is to accept that, yep, there are not good parts too. And I'm going to figure it out. It may take me a long time, but I am going to figure it out.
Totally. You have to go through the acceptance route, and then you just have to go with the flow. And even from that point of view, when you do accept it and you learn to have and create your own unique tools, because you will have your unique way of dealing with things, you're still going to go through those ups and downs. And those ups and downs, we're not talking about a few days up, a few days down. It may be a few seconds up, a few seconds down, literally, because our brains are working, well, not everybody's, because everybody's neurodivergence is different. But some of our brains work so fast. What would take someone, you know, to live through that feels like 30 minutes and up and down will take us 30 seconds because our brains are just going on into overdrive. So
Well, and sometimes it takes longer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, here's this thing that happened, and that was 3 days ago. I should be over it by now, and I'm not.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it takes weeks in a down before
Yeah.
you get back to the up,
Yeah.
and that sucks too. So.
Yeah, exactly. But you are in a position where you can have coping mechanisms. You know, there's a support system out there. Get yourself into a community that's very similar to you. You know, other people that can support you. Very important. Then you get that learning curve that will be made far quicker. But Lindsey, the conversation we've had has been really interesting. That's going to help a huge amount of people. So let's move a bit forward on from that. So we've got the situation where you took the medication, you got more focus. You're now using the experience, the huge amount of experience of your life experience in how to help other people within business to declutter their life, to have some focus within their life. And you're doing that now. So where are you going from now with your business? What's the next stage with your business to take it to the next level? And just tell us a bit more about your business.
Yeah. So, like I said, I work with people both in person and virtually on their homes. I also work with people virtually on productivity and budget coaching. So really thinking through organizing and structuring and prioritizing all of those different areas of your life. And so one of the big things for me is that I just personally get a lot of fulfillment from helping people with that. So continuing what I'm already doing. I think that sometimes growth doesn't have to look like an upward trajectory. It can look like this is working really well. And so let's keep doing this because it's working really well. So there's a piece to it where it's not the next level. The next level is continuing in what I'm currently doing. I also am working right now, and this is like one of those long-term projects that I don't know when it's going to come to fruition, but it will at some point. Kind of the back burner projects. I have had over the past 5 or so years, a couple of people in my life, some of my relatives who have passed away. And as a result, in one case, my dad was the executor of the estate, and in another, my mother was the executor of the estate. And so I have watched as they have had to manage the pieces that are left behind after someone is no longer here to do it for themselves. And I can see how difficult that process is when the person who has passed away is no longer there to say, here's where all the accounts are, and here's why I made this particular decision, and here's where you can find X, Y, and Z. You know, there are no breadcrumbs to help understand how to move through this process. And we live in a day and age where we could be creating those breadcrumbs. Like, there's nothing that says that you can't, next to your will, say, and here's where the passwords live. And here is the list of all of the bank accounts that you'll need to take care of. Here is where I keep all of the important information about the house. Does the information about the house live together? So really thinking through the work I'm already doing with folks, is there kind of a piece to this that we are able to set up and set aside so that in case of an emergency of some kind, whether you have passed away or you could just like be in the hospital for a while, you know, or you might have gone on a vacation and for some reason you're stuck for an extra week. Does somebody know how to come get into your house and take care of your plants and your pets or whatever needs to happen? Really thinking through all of that kind of life admin stuff that we do for ourselves, not only getting it organized for ourselves, but creating some tools and some kind of guidelines so that if somebody else needs to come and step in and take care of some things for a while, that we've got something in place. We live in a society with the technology that we can make that happen. That is not hard. It's just a matter of doing it, of prioritizing it, and understanding how important a simple one-sheet document could be to helping somebody understand what is important to you and what your wishes are. And so thinking through not just having things in order for ourselves as we're going about our lives, but also doing a little bit of that, like thinking forward, that future thinking, and putting down some things on paper so that the people that we love aren't having to muddle through things unnecessarily. So coming up with some way of helping people do that is kind of like the long-term on the horizon project. Not exactly sure what it's going to look like yet, but that's it keeps coming up, and I see opportunities where it's, you know, somebody's going on a vacation for 3 weeks, and if, you know, what this happened to one of my best friends, she was traveling up for the holidays, and she got a call from her condo association saying that water was pouring out from under her front door.
Wow.
She was a 2 days car trip away from her home, but because I had a key to her house, I could go see what was going on.
Yeah.
But if she hadn't given me a key, nobody would have known, because the only other person with the key was her mom, who was with her. So like little things like that. If there's an emergency, who gets called when, and where, what kind of things could you put in place to help kind of future proof against some really challenging, difficult situations? And what can we be doing, especially, you know, as a generation of people who we're seeing millennials, that's, I'm a millennial, and younger, you know, are not getting married as often, or not having kids as often. Who's going to be taking care of all these details? It's going to be our friends taking care of each other.
That's true.
And what is the most loving, kind thing you can do for your friends? It's to leave them the key, the guidebook, the tips, so that they're not tearing their hair out trying to figure out why you did what you did. It might have made perfect sense, but if you don't tell anybody, then they're not going to know. So that's, as far as the next steps, kind of muddling through all of that and thinking through how can we help people from that perspective. Seems like a natural next step from the things I'm already working on.
Yeah, it's a progression that and the growth, because you are growing exponentially, as I can see. Thank you for sharing your journey when it comes to ADHD and certain things that from the past. It's not easy to speak about certain, especially when you're a child. So great to know about your journey and how you got the skill set to be able to offer the services naturally to people, because you've got the skill set. And so I really do appreciate that. Unfortunately, we'll have to put a line in the sand, and we'll have to move on from this point in time. But saying that, how do people contact you?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is probably on my website. I'm terrible about updating my social media. That becomes a distraction, so I tend to not post on there very often. But my website's probably the best spot, and there's a way to contact me through that if you want to kind of talk about some of these things, or ways that you might be able to get a little more organized in your life. So that's www.getorganizedyall.com.
I like that. How do you spell the y'all?
YALL.
Okay.
So in real life, there's an apostrophe, but not in the domain.
There you go. Right. So you've heard it here. So if you want to declutter your life in more ways than one, then Lindsey may be your lady. And if that's the case, go to the website. I will have all the details below. Lindsey will give me all the details that are needed for you to contact her and give her a shot. You can see she's naturally gifted in what she does. She hasn't specifically learned it from some kind of book, but she's actually lived that life. And so it's lived experience you will be getting, and lived experience is always the best way, because she'll make sure it's bespoke with whatever help that you need. So Lindsey, thank you for the time that you've given us and sharing your journey and showing us how important it is. Even when you're neurodivergent, you can still be successful within your life and focused when need to be. And for that, we say thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
It's a pleasure. And listeners, we will see you soon, and I look forward to having that conversation. And sayonara. There you go.
All right.
All right.
That was fun.